The throne world of the Veyari Empire was nothing like Earth. When James stepped into the grand court hall for the first time, he felt as if he had walked into a dream built from light and glass. Towers of crystal arched above him, glowing faintly, with shifting colors like trapped starlight. The walls seemed alive, humming softly as though they carried voices of ages past. And around him stood beings that did not belong in any human storybooks, tall nobles with silver hair that floated like smoke, robes that shimmered as if woven from moonlight, and eyes that pierced like cold suns. James had been to alien stations before, even seen a few dignitaries, but this was different. This was the very heart of one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. And he was nothing more than a human security officer, wearing a stiff ceremonial uniform that felt 2 sizes too tight. He kept his back straight, but inside his chest his heart was pounding hard enough to break through the fabric. He wasn't meant to be here. Not really. The human ambassador had insisted on bringing security staff, and James had drawn the short straw. He was supposed to stand silently in the background, hands at his side, eyes forward, making sure no sudden threat would dare reach the ambassador. That was his role. Nothing more. But fate had its own plans. The court fell silent as the heavy crystal doors opened. And then she walked in. The alien princess. Her presence stole the air from the room. She was tall and graceful, moving as though gravity itself bent politely beneath her steps. Her skin gleamed faintly, a silver tone that reflected the hall's lights in soft halos. Her hair fell in smooth streams that shone like polished obsidian, and her eyes were the hardest to meet. They were bright and endless, like 2 galaxies pressed into her gaze. The nobles bowed deeply. The ambassador lowered his head. Even the guards shifted slightly in respect. But James only froze where he stood. He was not trained for this. He was just a soldier. And yet those otherworldly eyes brushed against him for a moment, as if she noticed him, as if she saw him. He tried to steady his breathing, tried to remind himself, "You're nobody. Don't draw attention." And that was when his mouth betrayed him. Half nervous, half trying to lighten the crushing tension, James muttered under his breath, words slipping before he could catch them. "You'd make a cute wife." It wasn't loud. It wasn't meant for anyone. It was just one of those foolish human jokes that spill out when nerves run wild. The kind of thing said in locker rooms or late-night talks with friends, not in the key, sacred court of an alien empire. But the room heard. The silence that followed was sharper than any blade. The nobles stopped breathing. The ambassador stiffened. Every pair of alien eyes turned toward him. James's stomach turned to stone, and then came the sound of her steps halting. The princess, halfway to the throne, stopped. Slowly, she turned her head. Her gaze, calm yet sharp, fixed on him. James wanted to vanish. He wanted the ground to open and swallow him whole. His throat burned as he struggled to form words, to apologize, to explain it was a meaningless slip. But before he could speak, she opened her lips. Her voice was music, clear, melodic, carrying authority and softness all at once. "I accept." The court erupted. Gasps filled the chamber like thunder. Nobles hissed to each other in alarm, their elegant faces twisting in shock. Guards stiffened, gripping their spears of light. Even the ambassador beside James let out a horrified breath. James's mind went blank. "She what? No. I didn't mean," he stammered, his face burning. His heart slammed against his ribs like it wanted to escape. But the princess did not waver. Her gaze was still on him, unbroken, unflinching. "In the court of Veyari," she said firmly, "such a vow spoken aloud is binding. You have chosen me." James's mouth went dry. His blood felt like ice and fire at once. He had come here as a nameless guard. He had spoken without thought. And now the most powerful woman in the galaxy had just declared herself bound to him. The nobles whispered like a storm, voices rising in outrage and disbelief. The ambassador leaned close, his voice a harsh whisper trembling with panic. Do you have any idea what you've just done? You've proposed marriage to the heir of an empire. James stood frozen, unable to answer, unable even to breathe. His joke had been nothing. His joke had been careless. But when he looked at her, when he saw those calm silver eyes, he realized something terrifying. She wasn't joking, and the world had just changed forever. James barely slept that night. The echo of her voice, "I accept," rang again and again in his ears. He had tried to explain, tried to say it was only a joke, but the words had not mattered. The princess had stood her ground, and the entire court had heard her. By the time the humans returned to their guest quarters, the ambassador looked ready to faint. He paced back and forth like a man standing on the edge of a cliff. James, he hissed, running a hand through his thinning hair, do you understand what you've done? You've entangled humanity in the politics of one of the most dangerous empires in the galaxy. James swallowed hard. His throat was dry, his chest tight. I didn't mean it, it just slipped out. The ambassador snapped around to face him. His eyes were wild, his voice sharp as broken glass. Slipped out? Do you think words slip out in their culture? Do you even realize? You just proposed marriage in front of their entire high court? And she accepted. James opened his mouth, then closed it. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, but deep down he knew the ambassador was right. The court had fallen into chaos because of him. Already he imagined rumors spreading across the empire, whispers of a human who dared claim the princess. He sat heavily on the edge of the bed, burying his face in his hands. What am I supposed to do? I can't marry her, I'm no one. The ambassador sighed, long and heavy, like the weight of the galaxy pressed on his shoulders. If you back down, they'll see humanity as dishonorable. If you go through with it, you'll be hated by half their court. Either way, you've trapped us. James felt a knot twist inside his chest. He was a soldier, trained to fight, to follow orders. He had never been trained for this. He wasn't meant to make history. He wasn't meant to be noticed at all. Yet here he was, noticed by the one person who mattered most. The next morning, when they returned to the grand hall for formal discussions, James felt every eye on him. The nobles watched with thinly veiled scorn, their whispers sharp like blades. Some sneered openly, their gazes filled with contempt. And then she entered again. The princess. She walked with the same grace, the same calm strength. But when her eyes fell on James, she did not look away. She did not pretend he was invisible. Instead, she looked at him as if he was the only human in the room worth noticing. James's stomach twisted. Why? Why was she doing this? She could have laughed it off. She could have called his words meaningless. Instead, she had bound them both with a single sentence. When the meeting ended, she approached him. The court fell silent, watching. James froze, his throat dry, as she stopped before him. You look troubled, she said softly. Her voice was not for the hall. It was for him. James forced himself to meet her eyes. Because I never meant... But she raised a hand, silencing him. You spoke, and words are power. I didn't mean them, James whispered, almost pleading. It was a joke. I didn't know your customs. Her expression did not change, yet there was something in her eyes, something steady. And yet, she said, you did not speak them to flatter. You did not speak them to gain favor. You spoke without mask, without calculation. That is rare here. James blinked. He felt the world tilt beneath him. She wasn't angry. She wasn't mocking him. She was almost grateful. He shook his head, overwhelmed. Do you understand what this means? Your people, your nobles, hate me already. They'll tear me apart. Her gaze softened just slightly. Yes, they will test you. They will despise you. But if you fear them more than truth, then perhaps you should not have spoken at all. James felt his breath catch. Her words cut through him like a blade. but not in cruelty. They were sharp because they were honest. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Around them, the hall buzzed with quiet whispers, a storm ready to break. But between them, there was only silence. And in that silence, James realized something terrifying. She wasn't giving him an escape. She was giving him a choice. That night, as James lay in bed staring at the alien stars beyond the window, he felt his heart heavy with fear. He could walk away. He could beg the ambassador to fix this, to erase his mistake. He could go home and forget the silver-eyed princess who had spoken words that bound their fates. But deep inside, another voice whispered. A voice that refused to be ignored. She believed you, even when you didn't believe yourself. James turned on his side, clutching the sheets with trembling hands. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know if he would survive the wrath of her people. But one thing was clear. He could not walk away anymore. The storm began the very next day. By sunrise, word had already spread across the palace. Servants whispered in the corridors. Guards eyed James with open disdain. Nobles who once ignored the humans now glared at him as though he had spat on their banners. The hallways of the Crystal Palace carried every whisper. The human dares. The princess cannot be serious. A low creature beside the air. It is shameful. James walked with his shoulders stiff, his jaw tight. Every step reminded him how out of place he was. The polished glass floors reflected his face back at him, pale and tense. A soldier trying to look calm while his insides twisted with fear. The ambassador had warned him. Stay quiet, James. Do not give them reason to hate you more than they already do. But it didn't matter. They already hated him. That afternoon, while returning to his quarters, James felt the weight of it more clearly than ever. He turned a corner into a quieter hall, where the glow of the walls was dimmer, softer. That was when he heard it. Footsteps. Behind him. Heavy. Intentional. He stopped. So did they. Slowly, James turned. 3 figures stood there, nobles, tall and thin, their robes lined with silver threads that shimmered like cold fire. Their faces were sharp, their eyes burning with scorn. The tallest stepped forward, his voice low and cold. You should not be here, human. James clenched his fists, but kept his voice calm. I was ordered to stay with my delegation, the noble sneered. Your delegation has no place in our court, and you, least of all. Do you understand what you've done? Do you think this is a story where a low-born soldier steals a throne with careless words? James said nothing. The noble leaned closer, his breath icy. You are dirt. You are an insect, and insects are easy to crush. For a moment, James's chest burned with fear. Every instinct told him to step back. But something else flared hotter. Inside him, anger. Anger at being treated as less than human. Anger that they thought he would bow and beg. His voice came out steady, sharper than he intended. I didn't ask for this. But I'm not afraid of you. The noble's eyes narrowed, dangerous. For a heartbeat, James thought he would strike him. But then the alien only smiled thinly, like a predator savoring the thought of a slower hunt. You will not last, the noble whispered. Not against us. Not against what comes. And then they turned, robes swirling, and vanished into the corridors. James stood alone, fists trembling, his breath uneven. He had faced men with guns before, pirates in the void, enemies who wanted him dead. But this was different. This was a hatred that went beyond him. It was aimed at everything he was. Human. That night, when he returned to his quarters, he found her there. The princess. She stood by the wide glass window, her form bathed in silver light from the twin moons outside. She looked calm, but there was tension in the set of her shoulders. James froze at the door. Why are you here? She turned, her silver eyes finding his. Because you are in danger. He almost laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You don't say. Half your court wants me dead. Her gaze softened slightly. They fear change. And you are change. A human standing where no human has ever stood before. James rubbed a hand over his face. He was tired. His body ached from the constant weight of glares and whispers. I didn't mean for any of this. It was a stupid joke. I'm no one. I'm not a prince. I'm not even important on my own world. The princess stepped closer. Her presence filled the room like quiet gravity. Yet when they cornered you, you did not bow. You did not beg. That matters. He looked at her, searching for any trace of mockery. But she was serious. Her eyes glimmered, steady and certain. You are afraid, she said softly. James exhaled, his chest heavy. Yes, I am. She gave the faintest smile. Good. Only fools are fearless, but you did not run, and that is why they cannot break you. For a moment, silence lingered between them. The moon's glow painted the room in silver and shadow. James felt his heartbeat slow just a little. Her words didn't erase the danger, but they gave him something he hadn't felt since this all began: strength. When she turned to leave, she paused at the doorway and looked back at him. They will test you soon. Be ready. And then she was gone, leaving James alone with the weight of her warning. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his trembling hands. He was still afraid. But somewhere inside him, beneath the fear, something else had started to grow. Resolve. Next evening, the palace felt heavier than ever. James walked through the endless corridors of crystal and light, feeling as though every wall carried whispers about him. No matter where he went, eyes followed. Some were filled with anger, others with disgust, and a few with cruel amusement. It was clear he was no longer invisible. He was a target. When he reached his quarters, he expected silence, but once again she was there. The princess stood near the table, her silver hair reflecting the glow of the lanterns. She wore no crown, no jewels, only a simple robe of deep blue that made her seem almost human. For a moment, James simply froze at the doorway, uncertain whether to bow, to speak, or to run. You're here again, he said finally, his voice rough with exhaustion. She turned toward him, her eyes calm, but unreadable. Yes, I wish to speak with you, away from the court. James stepped inside, letting the door close behind him. He rubbed the back of his neck, trying to shake off the weight pressing on him. Why me? Why keep coming here? Haven't I caused enough trouble already? For a long time, she said nothing. Her gaze wandered to the window, where the twin moons painted the night sky in silver light. And then she spoke, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. Since the day I was born, my life has not been my own. James frowned. What do you mean? She turned back to him, and for the first time the strength in her eyes wavered. There was a quiet sadness there, something raw and unguarded. My people see me as a symbol, she said slowly, not as a woman, not as a person, a symbol of power, a tool for alliance, a crown to be passed so that the empire stays strong. Her words cut through the silence like glass. James felt his chest tighten as he listened. I was promised, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. Since before I could even speak, promised to a man I have never chosen. He is cruel, James. Cruel in ways the court will never admit. But to them, he is noble. To them, he is the future. And so they would give me to him, no matter how much I despise it. James clenched his fists. He had faced threats before, had seen violence, but this felt different. This wasn't a battlefield. This was a cage, built from tradition and politics. She stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. When you spoke those words, careless though they were, you broke the chain. You gave me a way to say no. For the first time in my life, I could look at the court and refuse, and no one could stop me. James stared at her, stunned. His joke, his thoughtless words had done this. He had meant nothing by it, and yet to her it had meant everything. "I didn't know," he whispered. I didn't mean to trap you or anyone." Her lips curved in the faintest smile, not mocking but tired. "I know. That is why it matters. You spoke with no plan, no desire for power. You saw me not as a throne, not as a weapon, but simply as me. Do you know how rare that is in this palace?" James felt his throat tighten. He wanted to deny it, to say she was mistaken, but he couldn't. He remembered the way she had looked at him in the hall, not with anger, but with something close to hope. He sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, his hands trembling. "I'm just a soldier. I don't belong here. I'm not strong enough for this." She moved closer, her shadow falling across him. "You stood against the nobles when they threatened you. You did not bow, even in fear. That is strength. Not the kind the court worships, but the kind I have longed for." James looked up at her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was not heavy this time. It was fragile, almost tender. "You don't understand," he whispered. "If I stay, I'll make enemies of all your people. They'll despise me forever." "Perhaps," she said softly, "but I will not despise you." The words hit him harder than any weapon. For the first time since this nightmare began, James felt something new. Not fear, not anger, but a spark of warmth. He didn't know if he could survive what was coming. But looking into her eyes, he realized something terrifying and undeniable. He wanted to protect her. Not because of duty, not because of a vow, but because beneath the crown, beneath the title, she was more human than anyone else in that court. And he couldn't walk away. The court would not stay silent for long. After the princess declared her choice, the palace became a storm. Nobles shouted. In the great chamber, their voices sharp with anger. Some claimed the princess had been tricked. Others demanded punishment for James. The Hall of Crystal, usually calm and regal, now trembled with chaos. Finally, one voice cut through the noise, the High Chancellor, his robe glowing like fire. His words were cold, each one falling like a blade. If the human dares claim what belongs to the Empire, let him prove himself. Let him face the trial of worth. The nobles roared in approval. The princess stood frozen, her silver eyes narrowing with quiet fury. But the Chancellor only smiled, his gaze resting on James. A shiver ran down James's spine. He didn't know what the trial was, but the way they said it, the way the court leaned forward hungrily, told him everything. It was no test of fairness. It was a death sentence dressed in tradition. The next day they brought him to the trial grounds. It was no courtroom. It was a vast open arena carved into the heart of the palace itself. The floor was made of smooth stone, cracked with the scars of countless battles before. High walls of crystal rose above, filled with nobles and guards, all watching like vultures waiting for their feast. James stood at the center, heart pounding. His uniform had been stripped away. They had given him only light armor and a spear that felt far too heavy in his hand. From the stands, the Chancellor's voice rang out. "Human, you wish to bind yourself to the Princess of the Veyari. Then show us you are worthy. Survive our trials or die unworthy." The crowd cheered. James looked up once and saw her. The princess sat in the royal box, her hands gripping the railing tightly, her face pale. When their eyes met, she gave the smallest nod. Not commanding, not ordering, but urging. James took a breath and tightened his grip on the spear. The first trial began. The gates opened, and a creature unlike anything James had ever seen stormed into the arena. It was massive, a beast bred for war, with skin like black stone, and eyes burning red. Its roar shook the walls, and the nobles cheered louder. James's stomach turned to ice. The spear shook in his hands. He wanted to run, but the princess was still watching. He forced his legs to stay firm. The beast charged. James dived to the side, rolling hard across the stone. The air left his lungs, but he forced himself up. The beast swung its clawed arm, smashing the floor where he had been. Shards of stone flew past him. His training as a soldier screamed in his mind. Stay moving. Stay alive. He circled, dodging again and again, waiting for his chance. When the beast lowered its head to charge, James lunged. He drove the spear with all his strength into its side. The creature howled, thrashing violently, throwing him back. Pain exploded through his arm, but he held the weapon tight. The fight was long, brutal. Every moment felt like his last. But finally, with one desperate strike to its throat, the beast collapsed in a heap of blood and dust. The crowd murmured in surprise. The human still lived. The second trial came without rest. They led him to the storm bridges. A path of thin stone, arches suspended high above a raging abyss of energy storms. Winds howled, lightning cracked, and the bridges swayed with each step. James's legs shook. Every gust threatened to throw him into the void. But he kept walking inch by inch, gripping the slippery stone. His breath came in short gasps, his skin burned by sparks of lightning. When he finally reached the far side, his knees nearly gave out. But he did not fall. The crowd had grown quieter now. The final trial was the truth orb. They brought him into a chamber where a great sphere of light hovered, pulsing like a beating heart. The Chancellor's voice echoed, "Stand before the orb. Let it strip away your lies. If your heart is false, it will burn you." James swallowed hard. He stepped forward. The light washed over him, searing hot and cold all at once. His mind felt exposed, every fear, every weakness pulled into the open. He thought of his joke, of his fear, of how much he wanted to run. But then he thought of her, of the princess, standing against her cage, choosing him not for power, but for freedom. The light pressed deeper. "Who are you?" it seemed to ask. James closed his eyes. "I am no prince, I am no noble, I am just a man. But I will not run, not from her, not from this." The orb pulsed once, and then dimmed. He had passed. When James stumbled out, bruised and bleeding, the court was silent. The Chancellor's smile had faded. The nobles shifted uneasily, and the princess. She rose to her feet, her eyes bright with something fierce and unbreakable. James had survived. He had proven himself not by birth, not by title, but by sheer will. For the first time, the court could no longer laugh. The arena was silent. James stood in the center, chest heaving, sweat and blood dripping from his body. His arms shook from exhaustion, his knees trembled, but he was still standing. The beast had fallen. The storm bridges had not broken him, and the truth orb had accepted his heart. For the first time, the nobles did not laugh. Their whispers were softer now, uneasy, like cracks spreading in stone. The Chancellor's voice rose above the quiet. "The human survives, but survival does not mean worth. He is still nothing, a soldier, unfit for our crown. Princess, the choice is yours. Do you still bind yourself to him?" All eyes turned to her. The princess stood. In the royal box, her silver robe flowing like water, her face pale but steady. Her hands trembled at the railing, but her gaze never left James. Slowly, she stepped forward. Her voice rang clear across the chamber. "I choose him." The hall erupted into chaos. Nobles shouted in fury, their voices clashing like thunder. Some demanded her removal, others accused her of betraying the empire. Guards shifted uneasily, hands gripping their weapons. But the princess did not flinch. She raised her voice stronger this time. "I choose him," she repeated. "This human has shown more honor than those who hide behind titles and bloodlines. He has faced your trials, not for power, not for greed, but for me, and I will not give him up." The Chancellor slammed his staff against the floor, the sound echoing like a strike of lightning. "This is madness. He is unworthy of you, unworthy of the throne. What you speak is rebellion." Her eyes flashed, silver burning like fire. "No, what I speak is truth. You would give me to a man I despise because it keeps your court comfortable. But you forget, I am not only daughter of the crown, I am heir. and my word carries weight you cannot silence." James felt his breath catch. He had seen her calm, graceful, even sad, but never like this. Never blazing, never unshaken in the face of her entire world's rage. The nobles roared again, but she lifted her hand, silencing them. "You call him nothing. Yet he stood when you expected him to fall. He fought when you prayed for his death. He told no lies before the truth orb. Can any of you claim the same?" Her words cut through the chamber like a blade. Some nobles lowered their heads. Others scowled but stayed silent. James's chest tightened. He wanted to speak, to tell her she didn't have to do this, that she could still step away. But the fire in her voice told him the truth. She wasn't protecting him. She was choosing him. The Chancellor's face darkened, his eyes sharp with hate. "You would risk the stability of an empire for this man? For a mistake of words?" The princess looked at James again. For a moment the fire in her softened and her voice grew gentle. "It was no mistake. His words gave me freedom, and now I give him mine." The silence that followed was heavier than any roar. James's heart pounded in his chest. He had never felt so unworthy, and yet never more alive. She wasn't bound to him by accident anymore. She wasn't holding on to a careless vow. She was standing before her people, declaring him as her choice. The Chancellor's hands trembled on his staff. His voice was low, bitter. "Then so be it. But know this, Princess. You have declared war not only on tradition, but on those who stand behind me. And when the storm comes, neither your human nor your heart will save you." He stormed from the chamber, robes swirling behind him. Many nobles followed, anger still sharp in their eyes, but some lingered, their gazes thoughtful. The princess remained where she was, her hand gripping the railing, her chest rising and falling as though every word had drained her strength. James forced his body to move, step by painful step, until he stood beneath her box. He looked up at her, his throat tight. "You didn't have to do that," he whispered. Her eyes met his, tired but steady. "Yes, I did." For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. Around them, the court simmered with tension. The future was uncertain, the danger greater than ever. But in that moment, James felt something stronger than fear. Hope. For the first time, he believed this wasn't just about survival. This was about something greater, about a bond no tradition could break. And he knew whatever storm came, he would not face it alone. The days after the trial were heavy with silence. The palace halls, once filled with music and chatter, now carried only whispers. Some nobles had fled to join the Chancellor. Others stayed, watching every move of the princess and the human who stood beside her. Every corner felt like a shadow waiting to strike. James knew danger was coming. The Chancellor would not forgive what happened in the chamber. War brewed not only in armies but in hearts. Yet, through all the fear, one truth burned brighter. She had chosen him, and soon the empire would witness it in full. The day of the binding came. It was not the grand, glittering ceremony the nobles had imagined for their princess. No. The hall was guarded, the air tense and the crowd divided. But still the ritual of the Veyari crown could not be denied. Once spoken, once sealed, the bond of choice became law. James stood at the center of the crystal hall once more. His armor had been cleaned, his wounds bandaged, but the scars remained. He did not look like a prince, he did not feel like one. But he stood tall because beside him she walked in silver robes that seemed to hold the light itself. The princess. His princess. The high priest raised his hands. Who claims the hand of the heir? James's throat was dry. His heart pounded in his chest like war drums, but he stepped forward, his voice rough but steady. "I do." The hall murmured. Some sneered, others whispered in awe. The priest turned. "And who accepts this claim?"